and happy Tuesday, and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. And if you can look behind me, there's a blizzard. And there's a blizzard in Louisiana. I'm in Lake Charles, Louisiana, the center of the blizzard. Val Atkinson is here. Hey, Val.
Hello.
Val, I was in DC last week and it was freezing. And I got out of town in DC because I said, number one, I didn't want to be in town for the inaugural festivities. And also because it was cold. So I said, well, let me go to Louisiana because it's always warm in Louisiana, even in January. Val, it is 23 degrees. It's snowing sideways. It's technically a blizzard because the wind is over 40 miles per hour here. What uh, is it because Donald Trump was inaugurated yesterday? I just need an answer to that first. Why is there a blizzard in Lake Charles, Louisiana?
Some would say that, some think it, but thank goodness Donald Trump controls a lot, but not the weather, not yet anyway.
Not yet, anyway. Well, Val, we're here on an odd day. Number one, because I am, here in Lake Charles, and also yesterday because uh, of the inauguration, and you had all the former presidents there. You had some of the former first ladies and former vice presidents there as well, because the Democrats were doing what they do, which is, be civil, peaceful transfer of power and all that. And Amy Klobuchar, uh, who is one of the rising stars on the Democratic side, led the committee that did the inauguration. So she had to move everything indoors because Donald Trump decided he wanted it to be indoors, right? Um, Val, the speeches were horrible. It was another one of those dystopian, the world's falling apart kind of thing. I know you didn't watch it. I didn't watch it per se. I was in and out listening. I decided to do some other things, and also it was the King holiday. I didn't want to ruin that. But in the last few hours, as you had time to process through some of this, you know, watching some of these clips, what's your first assessment of this first 24 hours in the 47th presidency?
Well, I think one thing is clear, very clear, Ed, is that the first thing on Donald Trump's mind is retribution. Retribution and maybe keeping up a couple of the outstanding promises that he made during his campaign. One being deportation, and of course, tariffs is a part of that whole process, and the other having to do with DEI. He jumped on those things right away. Uh, so that's why his speeches, as I understand it, were hard to follow and hard to really make sense, because after the first two or three sentences, what else are you going to say about those things that you've promised about that? So you end up repeating yourself a lot. You end up being disjointed in your delivery system, and it's not a very easy piece to listen to. So he doesn't care anymore. He's got what he wanted. Uh, he's going to play this game out to the fullest for the next 4 years. And one thing, I hope we have time to touch on this later on. One thing that's interesting to me is looking 4 years into the future. Will Donald Trump have a peaceful transfer of power? As you mentioned earlier, that the ex-presidents and their wives and VPs came up and gave him a peaceful transfer of power. Will he do the same? He didn't do the same thing in 2020. So if history is in the indication of future, uh, we could be in for some interesting times.
interesting times, for sure. I Val, I kept thinking, and you see some pictures there of the presidents and stuff. I kept thinking that, what would happen if, one of them stood up and said, "You telling a lie."
Yeah, right.
I mean, you just saw the clip there of all the presidents sitting there as you were talking, and it had to be hard to sit there and say that he was going to restore American greatness, and some of the things he was saying just patently false, and it was a whole different kind of speech than any other inaugural speech. And it wasn't just because it was indoors, it was because it was just a bad speech. It's just like he just throws together some thoughts and he just says some things, and he has to hit on particular themes, which is Democrats bad, him good, not even Republicans good, but him good, that he's the only person that can fix stuff. Uh, let me talk about a couple of particular things. One of the things he said he was going to do was retake the Panama Canal because they had turned it over to the Chinese and it was unfair to the Americans, and that he was also going to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Let's just start there. Take those two things. Uh, he he said very little, if anything at all, about food prices and stuff that he talked about all during the campaign. And even his staunchest supporters probably are scratching their head when they go, well, what is the Gulf of America going to do for me personally? Other than the people who believe in jingoism and like to wave the flag and chant USA, I guess Gulf of America makes sense then. But the bigger issue of saying that you want to attack or take away sovereign territory in a place like Panama is very troubling to me. Can you square for me how Republicans like the current leader, Mr. Thune, in the Senate, and Mr. Johnson on the House side can sit there with a straight face, and even a lot of them clapping for those two positions, renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America and potentially invading Panama? How do they square those things, Val?
Well, the first thing they've got to do, or the first thing we've got to do, is understand the fear that Thune and Johnson go through every day and all of their followers. It's the whole business about fear now. Trump has already shown that he's not kidding around when he says, I will primary you, or I will do this or the other to you. Johnson has gone forth and taken a committee ship away from one of his Republican colleagues. So it's not just bluster, it is real. What can happen if you don't toe the line, if you don't do as you expected to do as a Republican lawmaker? So that being said, anything's possible as far as Trump is concerned. He really holds the rein to just about everything right now. And they know it. He knows it. And this is as close as we have legally come, Ed, to jettisoning this thing called democracy and institutionalizing something called a dictatorship, autocracy. I mean, there's tons of names for it. Oligarchy is being batted around as a term. One term that I like most of all, that's not being talked about enough, is plutocracy, which means that these countries run by people with money, and money is the measuring stick. Look at all the governors, look at all of the high ranking military people and judicial people who had to give up seats to the plutocrats, the billionaires, because those are the people that matter. And when you got a country that's being run by people who have not been elected to anything, and they are only interested in the bottom line as far as their bank accounts are concerned, we're in for a big, tough ride here, Ed. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, I want to remind you, you were either watching or listening to the deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. It's a very somber day, January 21st, 2025, the first full day of the Trump administration, the second Trump administration. He's only the second president, Val, I think, to lose and then come back and win again. And one of the things that struck me yesterday in some of the stuff I listened to and some of the clips I saw, back to your point about this plutocracy, is the people who were sitting behind him. Again, if you're watching, you can see images now of Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and of course Elon Musk, the head of the Doge department, whatever that's supposed to be, and also a person who is prone to give Nazi salutes. Uh, and one thing that I think that you won't see in today's program, I'm not going to play any clips with his voice in it today. I just can't take it. Yesterday was enough for me. And occasionally if you're watching the podcast, you'll see uh some video clips, but I'm not going to play any of the audio because I just can't take it anymore, Val. So back to your point about these rich people who were sitting behind him. Here's the question. Clearly, they purchased a seat in that venue. Since it wasn't outside and it was very restricted to about 700 people, you know that nearly everybody that was in there was a contributor other than the people who had to be there, like Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and those people. So the vast majority of the people were there because they paid their way in.
Mhm.
Now, other people paid their way in too, but at one point, one of the pictures you saw, Zuckerberg is standing next to Bezos, who's standing next to Musk. That's nearly $1 trillion in wealth. And with $1 trillion, you could give everybody in the United States a couple $1 million and still have money left over. Uh, what is going to be Zuckerberg and Bezos and Musk's real role? Because I'm not sure they're really into this. There's only two gender stuff. A lot of the, social issues that Trump brought up. What's in it for them? Because if you got almost $1 trillion combined standing there, what the hell else could you need? I mean, what is it? What is it that they actually want, Val? Because a tax cut is a tax cut, but do they want to pay no taxes? Do they want to just run people over I can't figure out if three people have $1 trillion, what else could you want?
Well, the old game that we used to talk about growing up as kids, we call it top of the hill. But once you get up there, all the options are gone. While you're trying to climb to the top of the hill, you may have a strategy to go left or right or push somebody down or do. It's a lot of things to think about, what pace you're going to go at. Once you get to the top, there's only one thing: to remain there. And that's where these guys are. You and I have talked about it several times, Ed, that once you become independently wealthy, once you get to the point that money is not an object for you anymore about anything, then you want to hold on to the status that that money brings you. It's not about money anymore. It's about the status that that money brings you. You're getting invited to the White House. Your name appears in print and on social media the way you want it to. People are writing about you in books the way you desire it to be done. So they want to maintain their position in life, their position in the country, their position in the world. And that's what they're fighting for. It's not about money anymore. I go back to the old Howard Hughes statement that he used to make when people ask him about uh, living in mansions and those kinds of things. How big is big enough? And he said, I would be perfectly comfortable living in a tent if the rest of the world were homeless. It's a comparative thing with these guys. So it's not about a more dollar here, a couple of pieces over there. They want to maintain that position that their money has given them. So it's never a question of how much is enough. You can't get enough for them. You've always got to be trying to get more. And that's what's motivating and pushing the Bezos and the Musk and those and Zuckerberg. That's what's pushing these guys. They want it to be said that last quarter earning profit shows, and it has to be some good news for them. They don't want to be on the red side of that. They want to be on the black side of that.
Mm.
And so that means they can never rest. They got to always trying to find a way how to make more become bigger, and they could become a trillionaire tomorrow. That's not enough. They've got to be the only trillionaire, and they've got to be the longest serving maintaining trillionaire, and on and on and on and on. So what these guys want right now, that's how you started the question. What they want right now is the current status to continue indefinitely. They don't ever want to call Donald Trump and the phone's not picked up by the third ring. They don't ever want to ask Donald Trump anything about a public program or a governmental initiative that they don't get a positive answer from Donald Trump on. That's what they're fighting for. They have control. They want to continue this control, and they want it in a way that is favorable to them, but not really uh, in a bad way as seen by the general public. They don't want
Mm.
the public to think that they're bad guys and they're on the wrong side of history and that sort of thing. So this fight is going to go on. Whatever Musk wants, whatever Zuckerberg wants, whatever. But the biggest problem I see with all of that is control of social media, because they are now attempting to control truth. And once you can control truth, nothing else matters.
Yeah. Well, before we take a break, coming up on the first break, the last question I want to ask you about is the uh the co-conspirators who don't have money. Not the diehard MAGA folks, but the Negroes that showed up. Uh the Snoop Dogs and the Nellies and the Waka Flockas and apparently, there's a big contingent in the rap community. And also Donald Trump gave a shout out to Black and Hispanic males who, moved into his camp and gave him enough to win. Here's the thing, Val. This is sort of brass tacks kind of thing. Uh, Donald Trump won, and he won a lot of states, but it wasn't a landslide. You still could have cobbled together almost about 200, 300,000 people across multiple states, and Kamala would have won. It would have been flipped, just like it was before. Uh, we talked about this right after the election about our disbelief that those Black and Hispanic men, decided to vote for Trump. What is it going to take to get to them, or do we give up on them and try a different strategy? If you were the new DNC chair, Val Atkinson, what do you talk? What do you say to young Black and Hispanic men? And Snoop Dogg isn't that young. Hell, he's almost as old as I am, and Jay-Z. So, what the hell, Val? Where do we go from here to make these elections not turn out the way they do?
As we said in the beginning, Ed, the day for the strategic planning, it has gone right now. I mean, there's no button you can push anymore and say, well, we're going to do this in the Midwest and in the Northeast, the 18 to 39-year-old, we're going to have this match. That's if you didn't believe Trump when he came down the elevator in 15 and you didn't believe him in 16 and you should believe him now, that the day for that is over. It doesn't matter. That has to do with truth. That has to do with the law. That has to do with facts. We're not in that realm anymore. You have got to understand what field we're playing on now. Like in your background, it's snowing out there. You can't wear little short cleats playing football in the snow. It doesn't work. You can't stop, okay? So you can't come up with the same strategies that you have for normal elections and trying to apply them to things the way they are now. Trump has come in and totally changed the dimensions of the American political system. And he's done that with the way he handles social media, the way he handles truth, the way he doesn't care if you catch him in a lie. There's no such thing as a lie as far as he's concerned. Either you win or you lose. So to answer your question, there is no strategy to come up and deal with these people. Only thing you can tell them, Ed, is, you have a few questions. Are you better off now than you were before you voted for Trump? What did you get for giving your allegiance to a man that's only interested in himself and his rich friends? How do you feel about your vote now? It make them answer their own question about that whole process, and keep up the voter registration piece, keep up the civic things about making people know what their rights are. Don't give in 100% about whether or not we have a democracy or not. Don't do that. Tell people to continue to go down and register and vote in every election that comes up, your state and local elections, your council, your county commissioners elections, everything. Just keep voting. And let's not forget there's a 2026 election coming up where each and every member of the House of Representatives has to run for election. And a third of the U.S. Senate will be running. So, get ready to vote for those kind of things and vote your conscience. I'm not going to argue with you anymore about how you should vote.
Right.
You vote any way you want, but go down and vote. And then you assess that after it's all over, excuse me, and figure out, did you get your money's worth?
Did you get your money's worth? Hey, I hear some music in my ear. That means we need to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about some international issues, how it's just going to impact how we're viewed around the world. I got one other domestic side thing I want to talk about, which all these executive orders that Donald Trump issued yesterday, and some that will have some impact. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
We're in Los Angeles, where the Red Cross has mobilized hundreds of volunteers to help those affected by the wildfires here in Southern California. With our partners, the Red Cross has several shelters open across LA County, helping those that have been displaced, ensuring that they have a safe place to sleep, a hot meal, and other resources. If you're looking for a safe place to go, you can find a Red Cross shelter by going to redcross.org, calling 1-800-RED-CROSS, or by downloading our emergency app. If you'd like to help, you can donate a financial donation to help those affected by this disaster by calling 1-800-RED-CROSS, going to redcross.org, or texting the word Red Cross to 90999.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It's Tuesday, January 21st, 2025, and we're talking the new administration. There's a new sheriff in town. Val Atkinson is here. If you're watching the video podcast, there's snow. There's a blizzard in my background, and I know I am not in North Dakota. I am in Louisiana. As a matter of fact, I'm in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is the city that's getting the most snow in this whole system. How did I fortunately get here? It seems like, Val, I end up in the weirdest places. And I happen to be in Lake Charles, Louisiana, a place that you're familiar with. And and have you ever seen any snow like this here?
I've never seen snow like that. I start going down to Lake Charles, Louisiana in the late 70s. I was going down to a town that's adjacent to Lake Charles and Alexandria and places like that called Opelousas.
Hmm.
And I was down in Lake Charles in 1973 was the first time I was down in that area and was down there in a regular area all the way through the early 80s. But I can tell you, I never saw snow.
No.
Opelousas or Lake Charles or any of those places around there.
And,
Never.
and there's some video of what was going on early this morning. Val, listen, before we left, I mentioned to folks that I was not playing Trump's voice today. I had enough of it, so you won't get any of that. I wanted for us just to talk and try to talk some of this through. And I said that on the way out that I wanted to talk first about some of these executive orders, and then we'll talk about how we're going to be perceived internationally. A lot of the executive orders, and the one in particular that causes me the most consternation is the one about birthright citizenship. Donald Trump says that people are coming here, dropping babies. Those babies become citizens, and therefore it anchors the parents and stuff here. Uh, I go all over the country. Folks know that they listen to this program, other programs that I'm on, and I'm subject to be anywhere in any of the states in the union. I don't see the country overrun with people. When I drove from Houston to Lake Charles a couple of days ago, it's just open swampland for the most part, or farmland. There's a lot of nothing between Houston and Lake Charles, but there's also not a lot between Albuquerque and, Phoenix, or Phoenix and LA, or uh, Seattle and Billings, right? There's a lot of empty area. You could pack a lot more people in the United States. The country of India, in terms of size, is probably, maybe a third the size of the United States, but they got over 1.25 billion people, and they could still fit more people into India. In this whole notion that, Val, that we're so overrun with these illegals who aren't doing anything and we're paying for them and yada yada yada. The xenophobia uh, is astonishing, and they seem to forget that they got on boats from England and Netherlands and wherever else they came from, Spain, came to the United States, and because of what they believe was manifest destiny, that God himself had said that you can have this because these native people are godless, and so you can have their land. Donald Trump invoked manifest destiny in his speech yesterday. Again, I'm not going to play it, but he implied, well, he didn't imply. He said that America wasn't great until the United States took over. So things like renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and renaming the Mount Denali back to the Mount McKinley were things that needed to be done. Val, those things to me are just straight up, xenophobic, in the case of Mount McKinley, racist, and don't do anything to advance civilization. And then the big lie that we're overrun with these immigrants who are taking away everything. The zero sum argument that they make all the time. Uh, Broadly, though, those executive orders and some of his statements about those kind of things, uh, are troubling because they could lead to very bad things. One of the things we talked about before we came on air was, where do you think this is taking us domestically? So I want people to hear what you had to say about how we get ourselves out of this mess, or do we get ourselves out of this mess? So based on these executive orders and saying there's only two genders, making all these declarative statements about invoking laws from the 1790s and issuing a state emergency for the southern border, all the shit he did yesterday, and how bad things can turn out based on how do you unwind some of this, Val, or do you unwind this? Not just in the next couple of weeks. I'm talking about, how do you unwind this so people don't believe this bullshit that he's spewing out?
Well, I think that this is where we may get a little help from our international neighbors to really right some of the wrongs that are going on in our own country. Trump is of the disillusion that he can pressure other countries and get to the bottom line, which is always going to be money. He can pressure them to make them do anything he wants. He'll withhold aid, and if it comes to it, he'll withhold military assistance until they do what he wants. And when he runs up against a country that don't buckle or bend to that type of scenario, then they become good people. He likes them, such as Kim Jong-un, such as people like Vladimir Putin. He likes them because they wouldn't give in to it. And the same thing is going to go with Xi and China. And the battle may come over Taiwan. It could come someplace else. Panama, for an example. But at some point, Hitler went down this same road. At some point, he's going to push and push and push, and somebody in the international lineup is going to say, no, we ain't going for that. We're not going to do that. We will withdraw from NATO. We will withdraw from some other alliance that we have. And you're not going to protect us? Well, take your troops and go home. Okay? I see a problem with Donald Trump making the wrong assessment that at some point, every nation on the planet will knuckle and bend to him if he pushes hard enough. And that's where he's coming up with all of this Panama stuff. He knows right now that if there were a war between the United States and China, that immediately we could make them, as the Japanese used to say, nayo, which means no good. We could get them in a position that they can't even defend themselves. They got several hundred nuclear weapons. We could get them in a position that they can't use any of them. They got several million men under arms. We could bomb out the places that they've got to go to get themselves together and do those kinds of things. And, having a billion people doesn't matter. And China, without the United States, economically speaking, is nothing.
Mm.
So we're using that to beat them around and push them into situations that they are uncomfortable in. And Trump thinks that he can do that to anybody. I'm watching very closely this international piece, Ed, because I think that's one of the areas that we've talked about that could be a sign that, okay, things are not going the way you want them to go in every phase you want them to proceed in. Now, what are you going to do now? That's where we got to be real careful. He's stupid enough to push the button. So we've got to be aware of that. But that's under the category that I call overreach. That's one of the things we talked about. How is it going to end? Overreach, the rebellion of alliances, uh, fighting back by other people, uh, MAGA possibly awakening because tariffs eating them up. They thought grocery prices were high. In about 6 months to a year, they could be double right now what that is, and gas. So MAGA starts waking up. And the last one, which I don't think will ever happen, and I wrote it in red on my little cheat sheet here. I said the Democrats finally grow a pair. I don't think, I
Well,
don't think that'll happen.
I'm dubious of that one, Val.
They fight back with things with something other than rhetoric and
Yeah,
words.
yeah,
They do something. And
yeah.
and people ask the question sometimes, well, what can you do? They got the House, they got the Senate, they got the court there. I'll tell you what you can do. You can have what we call general strikes. You can have boycotts, targeted spending. We got the people, we got the money, and that's something that Musk and Zuckerberg, they understand that.
Mm,
When the quarterly report comes out and says, "Hey, we got issues here. People ain't spending money over here anymore."
hmm
That's one of the powers that we have that Trump can't do anything about. He cannot mandate that we shop at X place or that we don't shop at Y place. He can't mandate that and not have a negative impact on the entire economy. So that's what I mean by Democrats growing a path.
Yeah.
Testicles. I don't think
Well,
they ever do.
well, I want to remind you, you're watching or listening to the deal with Ed Clark, Val Atkinson. We're here doing a post-mortem of the Trump inauguration without playing any Donald Trump. I just didn't feel like hearing his voice today because we're going to hear it a lot. One of the things I had hoped, Val, was that we were finally done with him and we could go on with our lives, but it looks like we're going to have to be here for all the 4 years every week trying to process some of the shit that he's done. And I do mean shit because it's going to be a shit storm. We were just talking about, internationally, Canada's not happy. Obviously, Denmark's not happy. And Russia's been making fun of Donald Trump, whether he acknowledges it or not. They've been showing naked pictures of his wife on TV and so on and so forth. She, clearly believes that he has the upper hand with Donald Trump, because now he's scrambling to keep TikTok alive when he was one of the people who said TikTok should have been banned. Now he's flip-flop. So there's so many, Venezuelan president doesn't like him. Mexico doesn't like him. Clearly the Panamanians don't like him. I think there's going to be some additional fallout. And then, I'm just waiting for him to go to one of these G7 meetings or whatever, G20 meetings and push people around like he physically did before at a G20 meeting, push the president of one country out of the way, just disrespectful. And then he does his Mussolini stick his chest out pose, yada yada yada. Um, we could go on and on about all the places in the world where we may have trouble. I'm supposed to be in Africa coming up soon, Val, for a business trip. Yeah, I get a little bit of trepidation about traveling internationally now that Donald Trump's back in office because people, don't care for him. I guess the last piece that I'll ask is let's go to the Middle East because we talk about that a lot. And one of the things that Trump did is purposely, or Netanyahu did, I guess, is purposely uh, delayed having an agreement with Hamas so that it would appear that Donald Trump had more to do with the releasing of the hostages and the ceasefire.
Same
Right.
thing they did with Reagan.
Same
Yeah.
thing they did with Reagan. Uh, are people smart enough to see through this, Val? Or because I heard a lot of interviews yesterday with people in Israel saying, "Thank you, Donald Trump," as if he did this because Netanyahu purposely delayed everything.
Yeah, well, some people are smart enough, and uh, those who want to believe a lie will hear what they want to hear and allow this to impact their judgment and that kind of thing. Those kind of people I don't even worry about anymore because there's nothing you can do to make them see the truth and that kind of thing. They're going to think the way they want to think. But the Middle East is a dangerous place. And it's going to remain that way until the world starts seeing it in a truthful light. Nobody wants to talk about the Middle East prior to May the 14th of 1948. It's like nothing existed prior to that date. That's the date that Israel became a state in the Middle East. Well, what was going on before that? Who was there? Was it just open land like the United States of America didn't have people in it when the Europeans came over? You know, it's a microcosm of what happened in 1492, Ed.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. That's why we're supporting that. You know, the same thing happened in Australia. Same thing happened in New Zealand. Same thing happened in South Africa and what we used to call Rhodesia. All over the world, same thing. Europeans going to other places. And you're a student of history as well. When's the last time you heard about some country of color invading Europe and taking over one of those countries? And just going in and establishing themselves and changing the names of all of the cities and setting up a government. When is the last time that happened? It doesn't happen. On this planet Earth, it happened the other way around. The Europeans fan out to the rest of the parts of the world. And they change these other cultures to European cultures. The language, the religions, the economic systems, the political systems, everything, they change it. And that's the way it's been, to the extent that some people think it's the way it's supposed to be.
Well, you Negroes need guidance. So we had to go over and get you because you were living in the jungle.
Right.
So hey, I hear some music in my ear. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to wrap this up because Val's going to tell me what the next 4 years is going to be like and what we got to look forward to. And then how we survive the next 4 years without going completely batshit crazy bananas. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this bit.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. Val Atkinson is here. It's Tuesday, January 21st. We're here on the day after Inauguration Day. We wanted to wait over the weekend because we knew there was going to be a lot of news. And clearly there's a lot of news, Val. One of the pieces of news is right behind me. There's a blizzard in Louisiana, which is crazy. But, you know, of course, you know, anything is possible when Donald Trump's president, right? I still, Val, you know, I woke up the day after Election Day. I was in Philadelphia. I was there because, you know, Pennsylvania was going to be one of those spots where it was kind of make or break. And when Pennsylvania was clearly going to be won by Trump, you know, I went to bed and I just said, well, that's it for all the rest of them, right? It doesn't matter how anything else goes. And it didn't matter how many votes you won in Pennsylvania or North Carolina or Wisconsin by. If you win, you win because we have this winner take all system. And that's one of the things that I know is not going to change between now and the next election, or probably in the time that I got left on Earth. Uh, what I do know though is there's 4 years that he's allowed to be president as long as he makes it, you know, he physically can make it health wise. So I'm gonna put you on the spot, Val. What's your prognostication for the next 4 years uh, for all those people who are dependent on Donald Trump to deliver something for them? I don't know what the hell they expected, but whatever it is, they claim that Kamala and Joe Biden couldn't provide it for them. Only Donald Trump could. So the question is, Val, what in the next 4 years is Donald Trump bound to deliver for those people, and who are those people?
Well, I'll just tell you who they are by category. That may have shocked even some of Democratic leadership. Let's start first with a group, Hispanic men, that came out and supported Donald Trump in large numbers. 21% voted for Donald Trump. Unbelievable. That's way up from his 2020 and 2016 election. And I wanted to, if I could, in about 6 months, get with those groups of people that voted for Donald Trump and ask them, how is this new deportation thing helping you? And can you talk to me a little bit about birthright battles? And how many people do you know who are American citizens because of the 14th Amendment that are languishing out now in Mexico and can't come back to their own country? Do you feel that your vote had anything to do with this? And then I'll move on to the black man who was up again in terms of their 2016 and 2020 vote. And I asked them, are they familiar with Donald Trump's view on affirmative action and DEI, and whether or not there is any expectation that there will have any impact on them and their positions within the United States of America. Next, one of my favorite groups, white women who voted against two females now, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, for Donald Trump. The numbers are almost identical. The majority of white women voted for Donald Trump. That's even after convictions for sexual assault, after convictions for 34 felonies, and after the Supreme Court got rid of Roe v. Wade in its Dobbs decision. And Trump runs around yelling, taking credit for having this to happen, saying, I told you I was going to get rid of Roe, and I did it. I did this for because I wanted it to happen. And then the majority of white women still go out and vote for this guy. The next group are what I call part of his base, big part of his base, poor whites. And you seeing Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and all of the rest of these guys strutting around there, Elon giving the Nazi salute and all of that. These poor whites ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. And they can't wait to get to the polls to pull the lever for Donald Trump. I want to ask them, you know, with these new tariffs and you paying 3 times as much for bread now as you paid under Biden, how's that working out for you? You know, I want to ask them that. Then I get to my next group, the GOP political hacks that believe in politics more than they believe in anything else. Ask them how all these executive orders working out for you, and the dictatorship and the jettison of democracy. You love playing politics so much. What's your role now under this, where you got to call Donald Trump to get permission to go to the bathroom now? And my last group, it is what I call Trump's real base. These are the evangelicals, the people who was responsible for Dobbs, who really are just as racist as you can get, that claim that they are about the business of removing racism from our society. These are our evangelical people. These are the ones who go around the world destroying other people's religion and their right to believe whatever they want to believe, and replacing that with Christianity, and telling you this is the only way to believe and the only way to think and the only way to do. And that's why they are doing these things. And these are the people that got out the vote for Donald Trump to have a victory in 2024. And I want to go back to these people and ask them, how things are going for you now, buddy? You know, have you converted Trump? Has he been baptized yet? You know, have you assigned a marriage counselor for him to make sure that his wife sleeps in the White House with him more so than at some other place? What's going on with that? So all of these groups, Ed, in my mind, I think some of them are going to say, we've been had. We've been duped.
Yeah.
We've been screwed. But it ain't going to have anything to do with the rest of Donald Trump's administration and his time in office. To have them to say something like this impacts the 18 and 19-year-olds out there who are going to vote the next time.
Mm-hmm.
If he screwed Uncle Joe, what is he going to do for me? Not him, but J.D. Vance. When J.D. Vance runs in 28, is he going to do the same thing? When am I going to wake up?
Yeah.
When
Well,
am I going to stop letting these people snooker me and understand that I need to vote for my own personal security and not for somebody who's a billionaire already?
yeah. Well, the list that you gave is spot on. I mean, and again, because the country is nearly 50-50, right? All the time. You just have to sway a few people in each one of those groups to make a difference. Um, I will tell people that over the next 2 years at least, till the midterms, the Republicans have antagonized at least one of their members of the caucus. So they were at 120. They may be down to, sorry, 220. They'll probably be down to just one more vote because they've antagonized one of the people by taking a committee position away from them, and that helps Hakeem Jeffries. And if you can get to any of those people that you named, Val, I think the Hispanic people, males and black males, are going to feel it worse, and they may be the ones that kind of come back. White women, I can't figure that out why they won't vote for a woman for a high office here in America when they've been the beneficiaries of affirmative action more than anybody else. White women-owned businesses are the ones who get affirmative action. And if they end up getting cut off from some of these contracts and stuff that they used to get, then there may be some backlash from that. But I'm not sure because they do tend to follow their husbands. And then I guess the group that causes me the most worry are the evangelicals, though, because they do it under the guise of religion, and I'm dubious whether or not they're religious at all, right? Because they don't know their Bible that well, and they make up a lot of stuff in terms of what the baby Jesus would want them to do. And of course, this whole notion that the United States somehow has some special connection with God when Yahweh was not even thinking about America, I guess, when the baby Jesus was born. I won't even get into that because I will antagonize the people at McLean's Chapel Free Will Baptist Church, and they may take my membership and my plot at the cemetery. So I won't say anything about that because it may come across as I'm bashing religion, but I'm not. I'm bashing evangelicals, or so-called evangelical especially the ones on that go to those mega churches and have pastors who
Who
encourage,
ask for your W-2 and
yeah,
W-4 before they assign your tithing.
yeah, that which is problematic, and that extends to both black and white pastors that are evangelical. Before we get out of here, Val, I'm trying to figure out what the silver lining is. Is there one? What can I possibly come out of this last 24 hours and go, hey, you know, it ain't all that bad. Well, I'll tell you personally, for me, you know this, and probably the same for you, because we bothered to learn how to do things, and we could have a decent job, and we've been able to buy homes and buy cars and stuff, and never really been in a position where we've been destitute or anything like that. Uh, we don't necessarily identify as having, struggled our whole lives or whatever, because we put ourselves in that position. So I'm pretty sure there's some people, Val, who say, see, you Negroes made it. You're not one of those, one of those that we don't like. We can tolerate you because you've sort of assimilated, you've been, involved in things or whatever, and you know how to do stuff, right? You're just like one of us.
Yeah.
But that what bothers me about that, Val, and we talked about this a little bit before we came on, is that, people in America will say, I'm Italian American, and we go eat spaghetti, and I'm German American, and we'll eat sauerkraut and brats or whatever. And if you say anything at all about being colored, being black, there's something wrong with that. And I have a problem with that because every time I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror, it's the same black guy that's been there for 60 years, in my case. He's been there, and I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I identify? Why can't I be proud of who I am? We had MLK Day yesterday, and Donald Trump had enough nerve to invoke Dr. King in a speech, saying that he wants to get to Dr. King's dream. And whenever white folks say that, it really rubs me the wrong way, because number one, I don't think they understand what the dream was, and they certainly don't care about what it is, and that it extended to all human beings. And so if you start out by deleting any talk of diversity and inclusion, you just made sure that you can't fulfill Dr. King's dream. So in the windup, all of that to say, is there a silver lining to any of this shit that's happened in the last 24 hours? What should I take away from this? Because, like I said, despite Ronald Reagan being president and the Bushes being president, and Republicans having gerrymandered their way in control around the country, and the Supreme Court being basically a rubber stamp for a dictator, I'm still doing pretty good. But that bothers me that not enough other people are doing good. Is there a silver lining
Yeah.
anyway?
Yeah. Uh, I would answer that this way, Ed, by quoting or paraphrasing something that Andrew Young said when asked by a reporter. What should the civil rights activists and other followers of King be doing at this particular time? Where should they station themselves? And his response was that, okay, when I get to heaven and I meet Dr. King, he's going to want to know, not did we win, not did I get a holiday, not did we ever have a black president. He's going to want to know how many of us didn't quit when things got tough. When things got really tough, what did you do? Because what he did, Dr. King, when things got tough, he bowed his head down, gritted his teeth, and kept on marching and kept on pushing. So I would say that's the one thing that all of us can do is don't quit. Don't quit. And bringing it back to 2024, as you know, Ed, I coach a 13, 14-year-old basketball in a 14-year-old basketball league. And one of the things, we're not having a good season this year. So doing halftime speeches is not fun in that locker room. But I've said on several occasions, and every time we're down, I say the same thing. I don't care if we lose by 1 point or by 100 points. One of the things we don't do is we don't quit. We want to instill in the minds of every opponent we play that these guys are going to play from buzzer to buzzer. They don't quit, regardless of what the score is. So I bring all that together to say that whatever you do, however you're doing it, whatever your strategy is, if you have to get a new strategy or whatever, don't quit. That's the only thing you can't do.
Yeah.
Is quit.
Well, I think we should fire the coach in that basketball league. I think he's probably the problem. We may need to clean house. No. Actually, Val Atkins does a great job with those young kids, and they're fortunate that he's out there, and more of us need to do stuff like that. I mean, it's not about the basketball, is it, Val? Because like you said, you try to instill in them some life lessons that they can take when they're out there in the real world and got to confront stuff like they're seeing, and then they see a positive role model in the form of Val Atkinson, which is very important that we continue to do that. Listen, folks, this is what I need you to do. Make sure wherever you are, you're safe from the weathers, particularly if you're in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi, Alabama, and maybe into South Carolina and far eastern North Carolina, that you make sure that you don't not out on the road trying to drive in this stuff. It is actually worse, Val. It looks worse now than it has in the last 24 hours here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So if you're watching the video podcast, you've been seeing over my shoulder how it's coming down out there and the wind's blowing, and it's literally a blizzard in Louisiana. Who would have thunk it?
Right.
Anyway, so just make sure that you follow Val's advice and don't give up. Continue to participate in Dr. King's advice, right? And Andrew Young, did you do enough? Did you fight to the end? Were you committed to making sure that, this thing works out in our favor, and not in our favor monetarily, because it will work out monetarily if you do the right thing, but everybody should be lifted up. This thing with having only the very richest people in the room should have been assigned to the MAGA folks, that they paid money to come to DC and they couldn't even get in, and then only 20,000 could get into the Capital One Center, which is really funny, Val. I had been there a few days before. I went to see Georgetown played DePaul in basketball. I leave town, and then the next day Trump comes in. So he's following me, I guess. But I guess I'll be back in DC on Sunday. That means I'll get to spend a week with Donald Trump next week. Maybe I'll go by and see him and see if we can have some coffee or something. Talk about some of this stuff. But no, things are definitely changing in Washington. The whole vibe was really different. The day I left to come to Louisiana, people who lived there were really somber and subdued. And then the people who came into town were upset because they couldn't get into the inaugural stuff. It was just a really weird vibe that was there. I was glad to get out of town. So I'd rather be in a blizzard than be in DC this week. But I'll be back there next week. Anyway, in the meantime, make sure you tell your friends and family about the program. Subscribe on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, on Facebook, wherever you get the deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. We'd appreciate that. We keep growing the audience. I think Val will probably grow the audience, probably the most we'll ever grow it in the next few months, because I really did not expect Donald Trump to be back, and he is. And so we got plenty to talk about. And then I got to work on getting some guests on here to help us process some of this, some experts to tell us why we shouldn't jump off the cliff right? That we can make it through this. Anyway, be safe and go out and do something good for somebody today. That's all we ever ask you to do. And we'll see you next time on another edition of The Deal. Goodbye.